Hey everybody, it's Dr. D and welcome. Today we're going to discuss the cost benefit principle and the opportunity cost principle, two of our principles that we're going to learn about to introduce this course, the concept of principles of microeconomics. The first one is the cost benefit principle. So let's take a look. The cost benefit principle, there we go, the cost benefit principle essentially says that when making a decision, sorry, my thing's shaking a little bit. Let me see if I can fix that a little bit. Making a decision, evaluate all costs and benefits. If the benefits are greater than the costs, make the decision, right? Do the thing. So what does this principle imply? Well, it really does say that at any given time, the thing you should be doing is considering everything comprehensively. That's tricky to do in practice, which makes this hard to employ sometimes. But it really does make it possible for you to be making beneficial decisions, right? What this essentially does is this guarantees net beneficial decisions at all times, right? Because what it essentially says is if your benefits minus your costs is greater than 0, do it. If benefits minus costs is less than 0, don't do it. And what that means is anything you do, right? Anything you do is something where the benefits are greater than the costs. Okay. Now, in practice, this can be tricky. Why might it be tricky? So, tricky things about the benefit principle, the cost benefit principle. One tricky thing, maybe I'll do that in a second. One thing I want to draw attention to just while we're here is that when we're doing this, this is a type of decision-making process that implies a few things. One, this is not descriptive, which is to say, this is part of economics. This does not describe how people behave. Lots of times people behave in different ways. And so this is normative, right? This is not positive economics. This is essentially normative econ. This is saying what it is to be rational, right? If you want to make perfectly rational decisions, then that's what this is. And so this isn't saying this is how people behave. It's saying if you want to make yourself as well off as possible, this is a good way to behave. Also, from an ethical perspective, essentially this is a branch of, or is a very, what's sometimes called consequentialist approach, right? Where the consequences of actions are what matter here. And so sometimes this can be self-interested, right? The costs and benefits can be the costs and benefits to you, but that need not be the case. It is consistent with what is called altruism, right? Where you care about the well-being of others. So this is extensible to both, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But altruism is possible in this. It just depends on whether you incorporate the costs to others and the benefits to others when you're evaluating them. Economists mostly think that the thing that people think most about is the costs and benefits they're aware of, which mostly are the things you know that affect you, right? Because you know what affects you. It's hard to guess how it's going to affect other people. Okay, so tricky things about the cost benefit principle. One of them is that in order to do this successfully, we have to convert costs and benefits into dollars in some way. Actually, into comparable units really is the thing. It doesn't have to be dollars. And so I've seen people do this in a few ways. One is right, rate on a scale of 1 to 10. or 0 to 100, something like that, right? So you can do that where you say how much, like let's say for example, you're asking the question, should I move out of state for an internship for a summer, right? For a summer internship. It's a good question to think about, right? Is this a good idea? Well, what are some of the costs and benefits? The benefits are, you might have, so these are costs, these are benefits. Benefit might be experience, and that can be both professional and personal, right? You get to see another place, get to know what it's like to be away from family and friends. But another one might be missing family and friends, right? Another cost might be rent, right? A benefit might be, I don't know, a nicer place that you get to spend. Maybe the place you're renting now is not as nice as the place you would get to rent. You get to see, maybe you have an ocean view or something like that, a nicer place, but there's a delta in the rent. So net rent difference, depending on whether you can sublet your apartment, right? Maybe that's a benefit, is sublet money. You get, somebody pays to rent your apartment for the summer and you get some money. But then the cost is someone in your space. These are the kind of things that you would want to think about. And you can compare these on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 100. Generally speaking, one of the things we like to do is, or one convenient thing to do that economists often do, is we can convert these into dollars by measuring your willingness to pay. Sometimes called WTP. And so what we could do is we could take all these costs and benefits that I just talked about, right, about this decision. Let me make it a little bit bigger so I can get everything, and I'll clean it up a little. And we can say, okay, like all that stuff is interesting and good, and there might be more things, that's fine. But we can try to say, okay, so let's try to measure this in terms of willingness to pay, right? So our willingness to pay, we're missing family, right, and friends. Let's say over the course of a summer, I don't know, just put some numbers to this, right? I would be willing to pay $1,000 to get to spend time with my family and friends. Net rent difference, let's say that it costs me an additional $200 a month for 3 months. So that's $600. Having someone in my space, I'd pay like $200 not to have somebody in my stuff in space, right? The experience, maybe the experience is worth $1,500 to me. Or maybe let's think of it this way: the professional experience is worth $1,000 to me, maybe, right? That's probably underrated, to be honest. But I'll call it $1,000. Maybe it's not a very good internship. Personal is worth $500. Nicer place, I'd be willing to pay. It's $600 more, and I'd only actually be willing to pay $200 a month for that additional money. I managed to find somebody that will sublet me for $100 or whatever. I'll get to bring in maybe $500 a month. I guess the net rent difference includes this, right? So that, actually, let's call that 0. And I'm going to say actually that your professional experience is worth more than 1,000. Let's call that 1,500. Internship experience is worth a lot. Right? Okay, so this is your willingness to pay on the benefit side. This is your willingness to pay on the cost side. So what does that turn into? Well, you got $2,200 of benefit, and over here you got $1,800 of costs. And since 22 is bigger than 1,800, this says take the internship. Now, we didn't include some other things in here that might defray this, right? So travel costs could get included in there, right? Stuff like that. Any wardrobe that you'd have to buy. Although that's tricky because you might need to buy, it'd have to be net wardrobe difference, right? Because it's possible that you'd have to buy those clothes professionally at a later date, and so you're going to have to buy them either way. So it's possible, the travel cost might add another $300, and the net wardrobe difference is $0 maybe, or maybe it's $100. If it's $100, now suddenly it's a push, right? Because it's $2,200 either way. But the cost benefit principle says we want to account for all of these things if we can. So, one of the things that I want you to notice is that what we've accounted for is not just the monetary costs, right? The monetary costs and benefits, which include the net rent difference, right, and maybe travel, as well as sublet money. We've also included and probably the professional experience also counts as monetary, right? Because this is like future income. But we've also included non-monetary costs and benefits, including missing your family and friends, and having someone in your space and living in a nicer place and a personal experience. Those are all benefits that we are quantifying with money, but we're not just considering, right, the $600 here and the $1,500 here. We're also it counts that you miss your family and friends. That's not nothing, right? A summer without your family and friends matters. And so that's something that we want to take into account. Again, I want to mention that this cost benefit analysis isn't selfish unless you already are, right? So one thing that might be included, for example, is the cost of taking care of your siblings. Right? So let's say that you're the oldest child, as I am, and it's a benefit to your family that you care about. Let's say it's a benefit to your family of $3,000 a year to not have to do childcare in the summer. You don't feel all of that benefit, right? Because that's the benefit to your entire family. So let's say that your benefit there is $600, 1/5 or whatever of your family. But let's say wherever you're going to your internship, you're closer to your grandmother, who you can help care for, or who will be happy to see you. So actually, closer to grandma, let's look at it this way. There's I benefit. I like being close to my grandma, and she benefits. She likes being close to me. Now, as a parent, I know that my benefit from being close to my grandparents would be maybe it's $500, but for my grandparents it would be like $2,000. Right? They find time with me more scarce, and so they would benefit a lot more. And so if we take that into account, and maybe she benefits by $2,000, but not all of her happy. That's her entire happiness, and I'm happy for her to the tune of 200. Right, 1/10 of her happiness gets channeled through my altruism to me, meaning I would pay $200 to get her the benefit of $2,000 or something like that. Maybe that's insufficiently altruistic, but one of the things I want to draw your attention to is just that other people's happiness can be accounted for. Okay. Now, what's good about this? Is that it's steadily following the cost-benefit principle. Your surplus is what we call it. Your surplus, benefits minus costs, goes up every time. We mentioned that. And now think about something like this. I went to a place the other day that had really delicious iced tea, and I paid, I don't know, $3. I paid, $3 for an iced tea. Now, what you know by the fact that I did that is that the cost to me was $3. You know that the benefit must have been greater than $3, or else I wouldn't have said yes, right? I'll tell you that I probably would have paid $6. It was very delicious. It was hot. It was very refreshing, right? Now, the benefit to the seller, right? So let's call me the buyer. So I'm using subscript B to indicate that this is the buyer. The benefit to the seller is that $3, right? They get that price, which is a cost to me and a benefit to them. And what we know then must be that their cost was less than this, right? The cost to the seller must be less than $3, or else they wouldn't have benefited, or they wouldn't have sold it to me. Let's say that, for example, including labor and everything else, the cost to them is 50 cents for a glass of iced tea. Maybe we can even, yeah, that's fine. We can leave it there. So what does that look? So now we have this kind of mathematical chain, right? Which says that the benefits to me were $6, which is greater than the $3 that I had to pay, which is the price, which is the benefit to the seller, which is greater than the cost to the seller, which was 50 cents. So what happened in this situation? This tells you that I was made better off right? And this tells you here the seller was made better off. The buyer and the seller are both made better off. Now, let's say to me the benefit was only $2. If the benefit to the buyer is $2, and that's less than the cost of $3, which is the price, then the buyer won't buy it. If they're following the cost benefit principle. Similarly, let's say that the cost to the seller is more than $3. So let's say the cost to the seller is $4, which is greater than the benefit to the seller, which is $3, which is the price. Seller won't sell. So what does that mean? It means if exchange happens, everyone is better off. If voluntary, I want to be clear, if voluntary exchange happens, everyone is better off. Now, over time, this can happen over and over and over again. This is true for one exchange, right? Now, what can happen over time is wealth can accumulate. There can be other side effects. But if we're just looking at a single exchange, then this is clearly true, right? We're not accounting for knock-on effects or anything like that because that, we're doing a reduced analysis. But I think it's important that this is how it works. All right, the last thing that I want to mention is framing effects. Sellers sometimes will try to take advantage, right? Or we'll frame things in particular ways. How things are framed can affect our behavior. But it shouldn't. Right? So for example, not iced tea example, let's say the price of the tea was $3, but on the ad it said something like this. $6, $3. Okay, so it's saying it's half off or something like that. On sale. When I notice this, the seller's trying to have a psychological impact on me. It's trying to use the fact that price is seen as value, as a measure of value. So it's telling me that this is a thing that somebody, somewhere, applied a price of $6 to, meaning that somebody valued it. And it's trying to convince me that that's the framing that I should adopt. But the real question to me is, what is the benefit to me, right? If the benefit to me is $3 or higher, then I should purchase it. If it's lower than $3, I shouldn't purchase it. And this $6, from a purely rational perspective, the previous price is irrelevant. Right? All that matters is whether at the current price the benefit is sufficient to me to purchase it. Right. That's the principle of the cost benefit. That's the cost benefit principle. We're going to leave it there. That's the cost benefit principle and the opportunity cost principle. And that's just the first one, cost benefit principle. We'll come back to the opportunity cost principle in the next video. Thank you. See you in a moment. Bye.